Passionate about music.
The one thing I knew there was a club called Heaven because I'd seen Frankie Gusta Hollywood's Relax video, which of course was a huge video from my generation, and I knew it was filmed at Heaven. So I used to go to the cinema a lot because part of doing drama on that course was keeping this observation file, which has stood me in good stead because it's really what being a writer is. You keep an observation file either in your head or in a notebook. But we used to keep this file, and you'd basically write, not reviews, but sort of thoughts and impressions about people you saw on the tube or something you saw at the theatre or something you saw in the cinema. So I used to go into the West End at the weekends and go and see a film. And I remember I went to see Paris, Texas with Natasha Kinski, and there were two guys sitting in front of me who were clearly a gay couple. This was 1985. They had the kind of floppy hair, that kind of post-brideshead look that everyone had at the time. So I followed them. I literally stalked them through the streets of London. Followed them for about half an hour until they arrived at this club. And I went and stood outside Heaven. And there was a queue of people, all of whom had great big huge handlebar moustaches and checked shirts. And there was me with kind of spiked up hair and makeup on and dangly earrings, thinking I can't go in there because there's no one that looks like me. They all look the same and I don't look like that. I'm not going to fit in. So I stood outside for ages smoking, and then I just left. And then I went back the next week. And I think the third week I finally got the courage to go inside. And I walked in the doors and paid my money and went down the staircase, and the first thing I heard was this guy sort of swish past and shout out, "So many men, so little time," and I was like, "Oh no!" But I did meet someone there, and I went home with the guy for the first time, and that was, there was no turning back after that. And then I met my first boyfriend there as well, so I was a regular at Heaven for a long time.
So you're at college. Things are obviously a lot improved for you. You're starting to find yourself and be who you are.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 1984, 85 happens.
Yeah.
And there are reports in the papers of a gay plague.
Yeah, which I initially I was only hearing about second and third hand. So my first boyfriend mentioned it, and he'd read it in capital Gay, I think it was. And so we started using condoms and everything. And then I had a flat share. By about 87, I had a flat share with a guy called Vaughan Williams, who is one of my heroes for many reasons. And Vaughan was in a cabaret troupe called the Insinuendos that was a kind of gay male version of Fascinating Aida almost. They used to sort of do comic songs, but with a kind of political, satirical point to them. And I shared a flat with Vaughan for 3 years. And he was very, very, very political. And he made me very political. He politicised me in lots of ways. I remember sort of getting involved in Section 28 when it was still Clause 28, when that was going on, and going on pride marches and everything with him. And then he got ill, and it was very, very quick, really quick. And towards the end, he wanted to go. By this point, he was living in this one flat, and I was now living with somebody else, some other people, but I was visiting him. And I knew I was told by a mutual friend that he wasn't well, and I went to see him, and he looked really dreadful. And he wanted to go to Amsterdam. He'd never been to Amsterdam, and there was nobody available to go with him. So I said I'd go with him, and we went to Amsterdam together. I went to visit the monument for the people, the gay people that were killed in the Second World War. And it was all very moving, and he was very frail, and it was all very sad, and he died not long after. And then within about, 3 months, it was just like one after the other, because I knew all of this group of people through him, and it was just awful. It was just absolutely awful. I can remember being at one funeral for a guy called Gerard, who was a friend of theirs, and I can remember being at the funeral and crying and realising I was crying for somebody else, and feeling so ashamed and so full of guilt. Now, of course, I can understand what that was about, but at the time I just felt, it just felt wrong and disrespectful. But it's like, how are you meant to process that when you're that age? You're not meant to experience that level of grief at that age. Most people experience that level of grief when they're much older and they've learned a lot about life and they're much wiser. It's really only kind of people who've gone through wars that experience that. It was like going through a war. It really was. And the hardest thing was that the outside world carried on as normal. It was just that the wider world didn't seem to acknowledge it. No one seemed to take it seriously except for people within our own community. There was no help and support. So everything was very kind of grassroots. It was, people like Regina Fong and Lily Savage and all these old drag queens rattling buckets and collecting money and setting up the Terence Higgins Trust and so on. For funding the early organisations.
So what did you do?
Well, I got involved in ACT UP. That was my outlet because I was so bad. I was really angry and really grief-stricken, as were a lot of people in ACT UP. And it became a great way of channeling that negative emotion, all that anger and hurt and grief, into something positive, which was to raise awareness and to provoke debate. I mean, a lot of what ACT UP did was controversial. A lot of it was very theatrical and fun. But it was all of it was sincere. All the people involved in ACT UP were very good people that whose heart was in the right place.
Passionate about music.